Last week we talked about discontent, remember, about Solomon and having everything and still having a big hole in his heart and still can't find really what is going to take away that angst, that drive inside of him that something is not right. So we're going to take it kind of a step further today and still kind of be talking a little bit about Solomon and some others. We're going to be in Ecclesiastes again. But I want to watch a video, and it's going to sort of illustrate kind of our point for today. So check this out. All right. Depeche Mode, Enjoy the Silence. I remember watching that video in the 80s and thinking, wow, this is really bizarre. But it's got some great imagery to it, and this is why I love that video. I mean, the song number one is great because it really fits with, first of all, part of last week. All I ever wanted, all I ever needed was here. And you hear what he's saying, it's all past tense. Was here in my arms. So it's great, but let's talk a little bit about some of the imagery that we saw in the video. First of all, where does he start? He's a king, right? He's got his royal robes on, he's got his crown, and he's carrying his chair around. So he's walking around carrying a chair. What does this sort of indicate to you? He's looking for, well, quiet or something. He's looking for something. And maybe some quiet, because where does he first sit down at? It's under a tree with green grass. It's a beautiful, peaceful area. And he sits and he contemplates. But then he gets up and he moves on, right? And so the next thing we see is he's walking in a rocky terrain, right? So what we're seeing now is the terrain is starting to change and it's becoming less hospitable terrain. All right, so now he's walking on these rocks. Looks like maybe it's a canyon. We see another picture of a smaller tree that he walks by. Not the same tree as before. This one is smaller. It's sort of less. And then we see him by the ocean. You see him looking out over the water, but then he's looking over the water and it seems sort of peaceful. But then the frame shifts and we get the view from the side, and where is he? Well, sort of like along the cliffs. Mm-hmm. The water is exploding upward because the waves are hitting, and it's like foamy water. Seas are rough. You look out way out into the sea, it looks sort of just peaceful. But when you get to where he's standing at, the waves are hitting and the rocks are flying out. There's no green. There's nowhere to sit and contemplate or be peaceful. And that's the point. He says, all I ever wanted, all I ever needed was here in my arms. And he's like, once again, expressing regret. He's still searching. There's nowhere to sit. There's cliffs and jagged rocks and rough waters. And so then where does he go? He leaves. And now he's in an utterly and completely barren tundra. So we see, and he sits down there and he's still contemplating. He's still searching. So what we're witnessing is this kind of shift from green grass, peaceful trees, through a parade of terrains, all the way to utterly inhospitable, no green, frozen wasteland. And you're seeing this shift from somebody who's searching, and then you can almost feel from like last week going from a point of discontent to something more than that. All right, and so those are kind of the images that are being shown in this video. I mean, this video is, almost 30 years old now, but it's great. I mean, it's still applicable to what we're talking about. So let's go forward then and talk about Solomon a little bit again. Remember, we were on him talking about him last week. We're going to talk a little bit more about him today, and then some other figures from the Old Testament. So turn in your Bibles to Ecclesiastes. I got so much out of Ecclesiastes last week. I don't know about you guys, but I just found it to be, Ecclesiastes is beautifully raw. And it's like some of the Psalms where when you read some of the Psalms where David is crying out, God, where are you? Why have you forsaken me? My enemies hate me. And you can, when we read the Bible, we're supposed to look at the Bible from a standpoint of everything is great, everything is fine, all praise and honor and glory be to God, and troubles aren't supposed to be here, and if they are, we're supposed to ignore them and give God all the glory. Well, many of the Psalms, you don't see that. You see anger, bitterness coming out. You definitely see it in some of the prophets, especially Jeremiah. And a little bit you see some in Hosea. But Ecclesiastes is wonderfully raw. It is painful to read because it is somebody who is in the midst of discontent. So, turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 1. I absolutely love this. I need to spend more time in Ecclesiastes. I really do. And it's something that I'm rediscovering in the last 2 weeks of just how beautiful this book is of somebody who is being utterly honest about the emptiness in his heart. All right, so verse 1, and I'm reading from the Message version. Next, I turn my attention to all the outrageous violence that takes place on this planet. The tears of the victims, no one to comfort them. The iron grip of oppressors, no one to rescue the victims from them. Listen to this. So I congratulated the dead who are already dead instead of the living who are still alive. But luckier than the dead or the living is the person who has never been, who has never seen the bad business that takes place on this earth. Then I observed all the work and ambition motivated by envy. What a waste. And here's our word again from last week. Smoke and spitting into the wind. A fool sits back and takes it easy. His sloth is slow to suicide. One handful of peaceful repose is better than 2 fistfuls of worried work. More spitting into the wind. And so remember, Solomon last week, he compared all the things as like smoke. It's something you're trying to grab. You can see smoke, but when you try to grab it, there's nothing to it. There's no substance to smoke. And then he also compared it to spitting into the wind, because remember what happens when you spit into the wind, it comes right back into your face. You'll read it if you go back into the NIV or to the King James, or even to the NRSV, which is also one of my preferred versions. You'll see it called vanity. All is vanity. And vanity is this like passing fad kind of idea. It's this, when somebody is being vain, they're always looking at themselves. They're always trying to make themselves look better, and they're always primping themselves and just to make themselves whatever. And so he compares life to that. And so when Eugene Peterson, was doing his translation of the Bible, he translates it, instead of vanity, he says, it's like smoke. Something you can see and you want to grab and hold, but you can't. And it's like spitting into the wind. And I think there's a beautiful imagery. So, discontent. What we saw in the video and what we see here is now no longer discontent. Because remember we talked about discontent is what? Dissatisfaction with what you have, with your current belongings, but not just that, your current life, your current situation, your current circumstances. Discontent really covers sort of that overarching unhappiness. Now, I will say that this was one of the first weeks where I could actually confirm that my children were listening. Because throughout the week, I heard many people, I didn't know who it was all the time, but I would hear, Grayson, you're just full of discontent. You're full of discontent. You need to meditate or something like that. Yeah, so I was hearing that several times through the week. I was like, wow, somebody actually listened. So, discontent is unhappiness. But when you are like Solomon and saying, I congratulated the dead who were already dead instead of the living. He says, but luckier than those are those who were never born. They should be the most congratulated or happiest because they never had to be here. That's not simple discontent. This is now moving into something what we want to talk about today called despair. Discontent is unhappiness, but despair is something more. So the definition of despair is this: the complete loss or absence of hope. The complete loss or absence of hope. When you look at your circumstances and your situation and there is no hope, there is no reason to go on. When you can say, better to be dead than to be living. I mean, this is what you hear when people are contemplating suicide. They say, I'd rather be dead. But listen to what you hear from Solomon. He actually says this. I congratulate the dead rather than the living. But more than that, it would be so much better if you had never been born and had to go through this. That is the voice of despair, of deep, deep unhappiness. But beyond unhappiness, of being sad, this is the voice of there's nothing left to live for. Life is not worth living. This is the voice of despair that we're hearing from Solomon. So let's look at a couple of examples of people who had gotten to this point, along with Solomon. Turn over to Genesis chapter 21 and verse 9. Genesis 21, verse 9. And again, when you read Ecclesiastes and you see something, you feel like maybe this is sort of out of the ordinary or abnormal for the Bible, or maybe this is sort of the exception to the rule. But if you look hard enough, there are several examples throughout the Bible of people who had reached the point of despair, who no longer wanted life, who said, all hope is lost. Genesis chapter 21 and verse 9. This is a story about the handmaid or the slave of Sarah. Her name was Hagar. Hagar, however you want to call it. And when Sarah could not have a baby, she gave her slave to Abraham so that Abraham could marry her. And they had a child. You know the child's name? Ishmael.
What?
Ishmael is the brother. It was also the son of Abraham. Remember, Abraham has two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. So, but what we do here, we get a full lineage of Ishmael. And not only that, but once we get to Joseph, we see Joseph sold into slavery to the Ishmaelites. Right? So you actually do see a continuation. Verse 9. One day Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, had born to Abraham, poking fun at her son Isaac. She told Abraham, get rid of this slave woman and her son. No child of this slave is going to share inheritance with my son Isaac. Definitely not the voice of mercy. We look at Abraham as being heroic. And he's the father of nations and highly favored of God, sure. And we think of Sarah, oh, it's like Abraham and Sarah, Mary and Joseph, you know. You start to kind of put them together, these wonderful little couples. Well, Sarah is not very nice, actually. This is the second time she has done something bad to Hagar, because in a previous chapter, I think it's chapter 18 or chapter 19, we have her being very mean again and chasing off Hagar. So, verse 11. The matter gave great pain to Abraham. After all, Ishmael was his son. Abraham loved Ishmael. Don't ever think that Ishmael was bad or he was evil or we sent him off and good riddance. Because that's kind of when you read the story, you have a negative image of Ishmael and a positive image of Isaac. Oh, Ishmael and Hagar, let's get rid of them. And some of that is reinforced in Galatians when Paul is discussing Hagar and Sarah and Ishmael and Isaac. But the truth is, Abraham loved Ishmael. He cared about this boy. The matter gave great pain to Abraham. After all, Ishmael was his son. But God spoke to Abraham, don't feel badly about the boy and your maid. So remember, God is speaking to Abraham speaking gently about Hagar and the boy, whereas Sarah was like this slave woman. And so you're kind of setting up what's going on here. God is taking a very different view of Hagar and Ishmael than Sarah is. Do whatever Sarah tells you. Your descendants will come through Isaac. Regarding your maid's son, be assured that I'll also develop a great nation from him. He's your son too. That's some mercy right there. You are hearing mercy. I mean, this is a very early picture of sort of the attributes of God, but you're hearing it. Mercy coming forth. Okay? Abraham got up early the next morning, got some food together and a canteen of water for Hagar, put them on her back, and sent her away with the child. He said, do what Sarah tells you, but God makes a promise. Do what Sarah says. Don't worry about the boy. I got him under control. Okay. He's going to be a big nation. I'm going to bless him as well. But for the sake of harmony in this household, and because Isaac is the child of promise, send him away. Because you can imagine the kind of violence that was going to take place, or was coming, or conflict that was going to be coming between Sarah and Hagar had this stayed. And God knows this, and God realizes this. And, I mean, Abraham's caught in the middle. Think about it. Abraham's caught in the middle of this, and he's trying to balance. He cares about Hagar. He loves Ishmael. Sarah is his wife. Hagar is, of course, a slave, so Sarah has higher standing. And Isaac is the son of promise. So now I have the son that I love, the handmaid that I care about, the wife of my youth. Sarah's been with him for forever. And the son of promise. Where do I go? What do I do? And that's when God says, listen to Sarah, go through with this. Now, let me ask you a question. And we're getting a little off, and that's fine. We'll come back to it in a moment. Do you think it was the will of God that Hagar and Ishmael be sent away? Think about this. Do you believe this was God's will? Is this what God intended? Think about it this way. Was Ishmael and Hagar and this whole incident ever intended by God in the first place? No, it was not intended. This was Sarah's doing. Well, we're promised a child, but I can't have one, so here, take Hagar. And God's like, yo, this is not the plan. This is not going to turn out well, but okay. And then things get really nasty in the household. And so now we're at a point where we've reached a conflict. We're at a crossroads. And so God looks down with eyes of mercy and says, we can't do this. We can't have it this way. And so send her away. It's never God's intent or plan to break families. But these things happen. These things take place. And so this is why it's really important that you catch that God says, don't worry about him. This family is breaking apart. You're going to have to say goodbye to Ishmael, but I'm going to watch over him. I'm going to bless him. I'm going to have mercy. So there's always this God adjusting his plans and his will based on our circumstances. You see it right here. I don't think God ever intended for Ishmael to be sent away. I don't think God ever really intended for Ishmael to be born in the first place. It was just supposed to be Isaac. But now we have both, and now we have to send one away, and God's like, all right, let me pick these pieces up, and let me pick these pieces up and make something new. All right, let's go forward. Let's go on. He put the water and stuff on their back and sent her away with the child. Now think about this. She's being sent. She's not even given a camel, a horse, anything. He put some supplies and a canteen of water on her back and said, walk off. She wandered off into the desert of Beersheba. When the water was gone, she left the child under a shrub and went off 50 yards or so. Apparently he was asleep, because Ishmael's like 13 or 14 at this point. She said, I can't watch my son die. They're both thirsty. They're out of water. She probably laid him down there because he's weak, he's thirsty, and he's fallen asleep. Maybe he's sort of lost consciousness. Don't know. But this is kind of the situation we're in. And you might be thinking, well, she just laid this baby down under a shrub. He's 13 or 14 years old. So why is she putting him under here? Because probably he's too weak to go on. So she puts him down. She walks off about 50 yards. She says, I can't watch my son die. And she sat. As she sat, she broke into sobs. What is this the very picture of? Despair. The abandonment of all hope. All hope is lost. There is no future here. I have reached the end. I am in despair. You're seeing a picture similar to what Solomon was saying. Better for those who have already died. They don't have to live through this anymore. But even still, the most blessed are the people who were never born. Despair. You see it in Hagar. You hear it in Solomon. Let's look forward. Go about 6 chapters forward to Genesis chapter 27. This is really good as well. Genesis 27 verse 30. Now, we are now at Isaac is a very, very old man. He has 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. And we know that Jacob has, through his life, not been the mighty hunter, the favored child. Isaac loved Esau the most, but Rebekah, his wife, loved Jacob. Now, Jacob the name Jacob means heel, or it could also be deceiver or trickster, or you could call him, like I heard a message from a pastor I listened to. It says you could nickname him Slick. He's really slick. He's always trying to find an avenue or an angle to work. And so what we've got is, you know that Esau had come in. He was dying of hunger. He's really hungry. And Jacob is making some stew. And Esau says, I'm so hungry. Give me something to eat. And Jacob says, well, you have to give me your birthright first. You have to give me your birthright, which the birthright is the inheritance. That's everything. All the money, all the property, all the titles, everything goes to the birthright. And who gets the birthright? The oldest. And Esau was born before Jacob by just seconds, but he was, because they were twins. So Esau just gives it away. He says, okay, great, the birthright's yours, just give me something to eat. So Jacob gives it to him. And so now Isaac is nearing the end of his life, and Rebekah says, all right, if Jacob is going to be it, he also needs to get the blessing. Because in that time, you blessed your oldest son. It was a blessing pronounced over the child, over the son. And it was like, okay, as I have been blessed in my life, so God's blessings and richness be on you as well. And it was very symbolic. It was very important in this day and age. So, verse 30. So let's read verse 30. Actually, let's go back. Look at verse 1. When Isaac had become an old man and was nearly blind, he called his eldest son Esau and said, my son, yes, father. I'm an old man, he said. I might die any day now. Do me a favor, get your quiver of arrows and your bow and go out into the country and hunt me some game. Then fix me a hearty meal, the kind you know I like, and bring it to me to eat so that I can give you my personal blessing before I die. Rebekah was eavesdropping as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. As soon as Esau had gone off into the country to hunt game for his father, Rebekah spoke to her son Jacob. I just overheard your father talking with your brother Esau. He said, bring me some game and fix me a hearty meal so that I can eat and bless you with God's blessing before I die. So Rebekah knows what's going on. She fills Jacob in. The story goes, Rebecca knows how to fix the meal that Isaac wants. She makes the meal. And then they kill a calf or a sheep, and she puts the fur on his arms because Esau is a very hairy person, and puts some of Esau's clothes on. Isaac at this point is blind, so he can't see, doesn't hear very well. So the meal is prepared. It is brought to Isaac by Jacob, who is wearing Esau's clothes that smell like Esau. He has some fur that's been sort of pasted onto his arms to make him feel hairy. And so Isaac is fooled. And so this is what Isaac says. He says, look at verse 27. He came close and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of the clothes, and finally he blessed him. Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of the open country, blessed by God. May God give you of heaven's dew and earth's bounty of grain and wine. May peoples serve you and the nations honor you. You will master your brothers, and your mother's sons will honor you. Those who curse you will be cursed, and those who bless you will be blessed. There's the blessing that is pronounced. And then, right after Isaac had blessed Jacob and Jacob left, Esau showed up from the hunt. And he also prepared a hearty meal. Then he came to his father and said, "Let my father get up and eat of his son's game, that he may give me his personal blessing." His father Isaac said, "Who are you?" "I'm your son, your firstborn Esau." Isaac started to tremble, shaking violently. He said, "Then who hunted game and brought it to me? I finished the meal just now before you walked in, and I blessed him. He's blessed for good." Listen to this. Esau, hearing his father's words, sobbed violently and most bitterly, and cried to his father, "My father, can't you also bless me?" "Your brother," he said, "came here falsely and took your blessing." Esau said, "Not for nothing was he named Jacob the heel. Twice now he's tricked me. First he took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing." Listen to this. He begged, "Haven't you kept back any blessing from me?" Can you hear this in his voice? Sobbing violently. I mean, not just a little few tears. I mean, this is somebody who is out of control, bawling his eyes out. Isaac answered Esau, "I've made him your master, and all his brothers his servants, and lavished grain and wine on him. I've given it all away. What's left for you, my son? But don't you have just one blessing for me, father?" "Oh, bless me, father, bless me," Esau sobbed inconsolably. "You'll live far off from earth's bounty, remote from heaven's dew. You'll live by the sword, hand to mouth, and you'll serve your brother. But when you can't take it anymore, you'll break loose and run free." Esau seethed with anger against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. So, here in those sobs, don't you have just one blessing from me? What are you hearing in his voice now? Despair, hopelessness. All hope of the blessings are gone. Now you might just think, well, it's just a blessing. It's just something he's saying. It's not just that. These were considered to have power. These blessings were considered to be valuable. These blessings were like everything. I'm blessing you, and I'm saying that all the richness and all of that God has given me is going to come to you now. And it's all gone. It's all been removed. And now Esau is looking at a life as a servant. He is the oldest of Isaac's children, he is the grandson of the great patriarch Abraham. And he is now looking at life as a servant, possibly even a slave. And he is uncontrollably weeping. He is sobbing his eyes out. And he's saying, "Is there nothing left?" And Isaac says, "There's nothing left." Hopelessness. The end of your line. Despair. This is what we're seeing now from Esau. Listen to this. Despair is a result of searching around yourself for an answer. An answer to what? Remember, what's the first step in this process? Discontent. Unhappiness, ill at ease, of something in your life, some kind of situation, your life, your circumstances, whatever, this discontent that we talked about Solomon is facing, despair is looking around for an answer and being unable to find it. Solomon had searched high and low, never found what he was looking for. So you're seeing good examples now of despair, of what this is like, of what it means to be at the end of your rope, to be at the end of all hope. And what goes hand in hand with despair? Well, sadness and depression. They mix with one another. Despair, there's no joy to be found. There's no peace to be found when you're in despair. When you feel like, I have nowhere else to turn. When you say inside of your heart and your mind, the dead are lucky. But even luckier still are the people who were never born. This is what Esau has experienced. This is what Hagar has experienced. And this is what Solomon has experienced. So, where do we go when we're at this point? What is the path forward? Well, we talked a little bit about it last week. And so I want to go back again and talk about David. David, if anyone has ever reached the point of despair, David did. David is the youngest son of Jesse. David is the youngest son. He is a shepherd. Now, you have to understand that shepherding was not an honored profession. They're not honored people. Shepherds smell bad. Shepherds are out in the field. It's a nasty deal. You sleep under the stars. You don't sleep in a house. You're constantly on the move and on guard to protect the sheep. You constantly have to move them. You don't get a day off because sheep don't take days off. Well, they don't. Think about it. I mean, if you take a day off from your sheep, all right, today's Sunday, I'm not going to shepherd today. You come back Monday, half your sheep are gone, at least. They've run off, they've gone off a cliff, they've been eaten by wolves. We're missing some sheep. Maybe I shouldn't have taken that day off. So shepherding is not an honored profession. And Jesse's sons were not shepherds, except for one. David was. So it's important to remember that. Secondly, he doesn't have a great life. The youngest son gets nothing in terms of inheritance or blessing. You're just kind of there. Oh yeah, we had another kid. It's number 9 or number 12 or whatever. Yeah, it's like you. You get this, he's the last one, he's sort of an afterthought. And then what happens? Samuel shows up, goes through all the brothers, finds David, and anoints him as king. And then we know just a short time later, the people of Israel, the nation of Israel, is fighting against the Philistines. Then there's Goliath. David kills him. The word is out about David that Samuel has also blessed him and anointed him to be the king. Saul is trying to kill him. Saul throws spears at him. Saul hunts him down with the army of Israel. David even has to go and live with the Philistines for a time, their enemy. He has to live in a cave for a while. If you want to talk about somebody who has no hope, David was the one. And then when David and his followers, he's got a band of people who are with him, who are loyal to him. They go off and they help the Philistines in some battle. And the camp back home is raided. And all of their wives and children are taken away. Some are murdered, some are taken away. And there's this great sorrow and cry that comes out from when David and his men return. And they are deeply sad and they are deeply upset. And they have reached the point of despair. But the difference is this. Throughout all this process, David knew how to stop. Be quiet. And stop searching. Because discontent leads us to search for answers. We talked about that last week. Discontent leads you to search around to find what you're looking for, to find the thing that's finally going to take away this ill-at-ease feeling inside. And when you don't find it because you're constantly looking and searching, like the video, walking from place to place to place, it leads you to a point of despair because you can't find it. You don't see an answer. The loss of hope is when you don't see the answer. You can't imagine the answer. I can't see how this will ever work. But David, in his life experience, has found a way out of despair. And he writes about it. And we talked about it last week, and I'm going to read it to you again. It's the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. And so you can kind of imagine that David, in the midst of his pain and all through this time, he writes this down into a psalm once he's king. But you can imagine this is something that's been on his heart for a while. And when things are at their worst, David says in his mind, the Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. God is my shepherd. Why? Because David has a shepherd frame of reference. He was a shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. What does it mean? I was a shepherd. I took care of the sheep. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want, or he's going to take care of me. And what does that mean? I'm discontented. I'm upset. But he leads me beside still waters. And he has me lay down next to green pastures. He lies me down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. What are these pictures of? Peace. Ease. Rest. But definitely peace. And then what does David say? He restores my soul. Because when you're in despair, and when you believe there's no hope to be found, your soul is crying out and is saying, all hope is lost. But David said, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. David has understood what this means. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. In other words, when I'm in despair and I can't see the way, he restores my soul and he shows me a way forward. What is David telling you? There's never a time when all hope is lost. That time does not exist when you learn to look inward and trust in God as opposed to looking outward and not seeing a solution. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, a place or a path of hopelessness and despair, I will fear no evil. For your rod and your staff. What are rods and staffs? They're the tools of a shepherd. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And then what does he say? And I want you to catch this. This is so important. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. What is the table? What is this representing? Preparing a table before me in the presence of my enemies essentially is you're setting this table of food and a meal with me on one side and my enemies on the other side. What is the connotation here? You are helping me to reconcile with my enemies. You are making peace between me and my enemies. You don't hear revenge or anger. You strike down my enemies and blast them into a million atoms. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for your nuclear missile and your cruise missile are my comfort. You prepare a table of poisonous snakes and scorpions to destroy my enemies. It's not what he's saying at all. And this is why this is so beautiful. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. He's saying, you make peace between me and my enemies. And to bring it forward to talking about despair, what he's saying, you help heal the circumstances of my despair. Because we've just talked about the valley of the shadow of death. Despair, darkness, hopelessness. And in that frame of mind, you prepare a table You reconcile, you bring peace. You anoint my head with oil, which is a sign of blessing. And then what does he say? We talked about it last week. My cup, it overflows. I don't have need. I don't have a reason to despair. I don't have a reason to cry and say, oh, it's hopeless. I can look at my cup and see that it is overflowing. It's not a cup full of sand like we talked about last week. This is a cup of good wine, and it refreshes me. And you are pouring this cup, and my cup can't even hold what you're giving me. My cup overflows. He says, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It doesn't mean I'm going to be in church every day of my life. It essentially means the house of the Lord, the presence of God, the trust in God. This is where I will be. So, this is David, how he responds to not just discontent, but despair. Because you see both of them mentioned in the 23rd Psalm. So what does that mean for us? How do we take a look inward? How do we take a view and shut our eyes to the outside and start looking inward? Well, you're going to find in times in your life, as we have and as you all will, you're going to find times where you can't see an answer. And not only can you not see an answer, but you don't even know how to pray for that answer. You don't know what to say. You don't know how to pray. You don't know how to call on God. And I even today in my life, there are many times where I'm like, I don't even have the words to pray. And even if I do pray, I don't trust myself that I would pray the right prayers. So think about what David did when he was in the cave, or when David was seeing his camp and all of his children and all the wives of the people were gone. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. These are things that you can pray. And you can put them in your heart. And you can take these words of David and you can pray the same prayers that David prayed. And it's okay. Because there is a lot of times when we don't have the words to say. We don't have the words that we're looking for. It's hard sometimes. When you're just struggling and you're in despair and you can't find the way forward and you don't even have the words to express what's going on, you're in a position like David was. And so you can use what David said. You can close your eyes and just think to yourself and think to God, the Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. You have me to lie down in green pastures. You lead me beside still waters. O God, you restore my soul. Have you ever asked somebody to pray for you when you were in a bad time? Why do we do that? Because we don't have the words to pray, because we're in a place where we just don't even know what to say. I don't know how to pray. Can you please pray for me? Well, we've got these wonderful prayers of old that when we don't have the words, we can use as well. And here's David offering you one from a very dark place. He knows what to say. And then there are other ways forward. For instance, there's a variation that Brian Zahn has on the prayer of St. Patrick. And it goes very simply like this. Christ above me, Christ below me. Christ in front of me, Christ behind me. Christ on my right hand, Christ on my left hand. Christ all around me, and Christ inside of me. And so you take those words, and what is he saying here? Christ above me, you are God. You are the Word who was with God and who was God. And then Christ below me, you are the Word who became flesh and dwelled among us. You are Emmanuel, God with us. You are Christ in front of me, when I can see you doing things and working in my life. And you are Christ behind me. And I trust to know that when I can't see you and I don't feel your presence, you are there. You're taking care of me. You are Christ behind me. Even when I don't sense your presence, and even when I'm not sure you're there, I trust that you're taking care of me. You're Christ on my right hand, which is saying that you give me my strength. The right hand is the symbol of power. It's the symbol of authority. So when you have someone who's seated at the right hand, it's the place of strength. So in all my strengths and all my blessings, you're there and you've given me those. Christ on my left. In my weakness and in my failings, you help me and you give me strength. Christ all around me. You are everywhere and in everything. And there is no place I can go where you don't see me. You're not keeping track of me. And you're not watching over me. And then Christ inside of me. You are present with me. You make your home inside of my heart. I am yours forever. Christ above me. Christ below me. Christ in front of me. Christ behind me. Christ on my right hand. Christ on my left hand. Christ all around me. Christ inside of me. And you understand what you're saying, and you begin to pray this, and you let this prayer permeate your soul, and you let this prayer be an offering up to God when you don't have the words to pray. And then he begins to bring rest and trust and peace to your soul. And so learn to use these. Learn that in these times of darkness in your life that come and go, that you don't have to sit in despair, but you can be set free, you can rest easy, and you can be like David and say, my cup overflows. Let's pray.